I don't care what her resume says. Women like her don't belong in this building. The voice carried through the glass partition. Clear, confident. The voice of a man who had never been told no in a space he controlled. Evelyn Scott stood in the reception area of Vanguard Meridian Tech, her leather portfolio resting against her hip, her expression unchanged. She had heard every word. So had the receptionist, whose fingers froze above her keyboard, whose eyes darted everywhere except toward the woman standing 6 feet away. The man stepped out of the corner office. Bryce Callahan, Chief Executive Officer, 52 years old, 6'3", former college linebacker who still moved like he expected people to part for him. His handshake was a weapon. His smile was a door closing. He saw Evelyn. Stopped. Is there something I can help you with? The question landed like an accusation. Not who are you or how can we assist you today, just the flat challenge of a man who had already decided she was in the wrong place. Evelyn kept her voice level. I have an interview scheduled. 9:30, product strategy position. Bryce's eyes moved from her face to her clothes. Simple blazer, dark slacks, natural hair twisted into a low bun. No designer labels. No visible jewelry except a thin gold watch with a worn leather band. HR handles all candidate processing. He turned to the receptionist. Chloe, direct her to the appropriate entrance. Then he walked away. Back straight, decision made. Chloe's face flushed pink. I'm so sorry, ma'am. The candidate entrance is actually this entrance. Evelyn's voice remained calm. The appointment confirmation email specified this lobby, 3rd floor reception, 9:30 a.m. Chloe pulled up her screen, typed, frowned, typed again. I'm not seeing you in our system. What was the name again? Evelyn Scott. More typing. A longer pause. I'm sorry, Ms. Scott. There's no interview scheduled under that name for today. The lie hung in the air between them. Evelyn had received 3 confirmation emails, 2 calendar invites, 1 phone call from a coordinator named April who had sounded genuinely enthusiastic about the fresh perspective Evelyn would bring. All of that had existed, until it didn't. I have the confirmation. Evelyn reached into her portfolio, removed a printed email, placed it on the reception desk with the precision of someone who had learned that documentation was survival. Chloe looked at the paper, looked at her screen, looked at the paper again. I'll need to contact HR. If you could just wait over there. She gestured toward a cluster of chairs in the corner, away from the main traffic flow, away from the window, away from the view of anyone important who might walk past and wonder why a black woman in simple clothes was standing in their executive reception area. Evelyn walked to the chairs, sat down, opened her portfolio, and waited. If you're already hooked, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens when the truth comes out. 47 minutes earlier, Evelyn Scott had stood outside the Vanguard Meridian Tech building studying its glass facade. 47 floors of ambition and engineering rising from Tampa's downtown district. The company had gone public 18 months ago. $340 million valuation. Growth projections that made investors giddy. She knew those numbers, had memorized them the way other people memorized prayer. The morning sun caught the building's surface and scattered light across the plaza where she stood. Early joggers passed. Executives in tailored suits rushed toward the main entrance clutching coffee cups that cost more than some people's hourly wage. None of them looked at her. None of them saw her. That was the point. Evelyn checked her watch. 8:43. She had time. She walked to a bench near the entrance, sat down, and removed a worn leather notebook from her bag. The cover was soft from years of handling. The initials on the corner read, B.S. Bellamy-Scott, her grandmother. The woman who had taught her that power often came in containers people didn't recognize until it was too late. She opened the notebook. Began writing. Date. Time. Weather conditions. Number of people entering the building. demographic breakdown of those visible through the glass doors. These were habits now. Automatic. The documentation that had protected her through graduate school, through 3 corporate positions, through every space where her presence was questioned before her credentials were examined. At 8:51, she closed the notebook, placed it back in her bag alongside the portfolio containing her resume, her printed email confirmations, and a thin manila folder she had not opened in 4 months. At 8:55, she entered the building. The security desk was manned by a guard in his late 20s. Name tag, Torres. He looked up when she approached, and something shifted in his posture, a straightening, an assessment. "Can I help you?" "Interview, 3rd floor, 9:30. Torres glanced at his computer. "Name?" "Evelyn Scott." Typing. A pause. "You're here to see who?" "HR Coordinator, April Chen." More typing. The pause extended. Behind her, a white man in a Patagonia vest walked through the turnstile without stopping. The guard didn't even look up. "I'm not finding that in the system. Let me call up." He reached for the phone. Dialed. Waited. Spoke in low tones that Evelyn could not quite hear. His eyes flicked toward her twice during the conversation. When he hung up, his expression had changed. More formal now. More careful. "They'll send someone down for you. If you could just wait by the elevators." Evelyn nodded, walked to the elevator bank, did not sit down. 7 minutes passed. 8. The elevator doors opened and closed for other visitors. No one came for her. At 9:07, a young woman emerged from the elevator, blonde ponytail, tablet in hand, the particular expression of someone who had been given an unpleasant task. "Ms. Scott?" "Yes." "I'm Jessica from HR. There's been some confusion with the scheduling. If you could follow me, we'll get this sorted out." The words were neutral, the tone was not. Evelyn followed her into the elevator. Jessica pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The doors closed. Neither of them spoke. The HR department occupied a corner of the 3rd floor separated from the main office by glass partitions etched with motivational phrases. Innovate, collaborate, exceed. The irony was not lost on Evelyn. Jessica led her to a small conference room. Gray carpet, white table, 3 chairs, no windows. "Someone will be with you shortly. Can I get you water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Jessica left. The door closed with a soft click. Evelyn placed her portfolio on the table, removed her notebook, wrote, 9:14 a.m., conference room B4, no windows, 1 door, detention room configuration. She had seen rooms like this before. They were designed to make people feel small, to create an environment where power imbalances felt natural, where questions could be asked without witnesses. At 9:22, the door opened. A woman entered, mid-40s, tailored dress in corporate gray, hair styled with architectural precision, smile calibrated to convey warmth without offering it. "Ms. Scott, I'm Margot Lindquist, Vice President of Culture and Talent." She extended her hand. The handshake was brief, professional, empty. "Thank you for coming in. There seems to have been some miscommunication about today's schedule. I have 3 confirmation emails, 2 calendar invites, a phone call from your coordinator April confirming the time and location." Margot's smile remained fixed. "Yes, well, these things happen. Systems glitch. Coordinates get crossed." She sat down across from Evelyn, placed her hands flat on the table. "The position you applied for has actually been filled, internally, last week. The job posting was live as of yesterday. I checked before leaving my hotel." A flicker of something crossed Margot's face, irritation at being corrected. The expression of someone who was not used to being challenged by people who looked like Evelyn. "Website updates sometimes lag behind internal decisions. I apologize for the confusion. We do have other openings that might be a better fit for your background." "What positions would those be?" Margot's pause was microscopically too long. We have openings in customer success, community management, roles that allow for more direct engagement with diverse populations. Translation: roles that were not strategy, not leadership, not in the room where decisions were made. Evelyn kept her voice even. I applied for product strategy because my experience is in product strategy. 15 years, 3 companies, successful launches in fintech, enterprise software, and consumer applications. Yes, I reviewed your materials. Very impressive on paper. The qualifier hung in the air. But culture fit is equally important here at Vanguard. We've found that candidates who thrive are those who align with our particular way of working. Which particular way is that? Margot's smile thinned. Perhaps this isn't the right conversation for today. Let me connect you with our recruiter for the community management role. She can explain more about. I would like to speak with the hiring manager for product strategy, the one who reviewed my application. That won't be possible. Why not? Because the position has been filled, as I mentioned. You mentioned it was filled internally. Internal candidates don't typically go through external posting cycles, unless the posting was for compliance purposes, to demonstrate that outside candidates were considered. Silence. The air in the room changed temperature. Margot stood. I think we're done here, Ms. Scott. I'll have Jessica escort you out. I know the way. Thank you for your time. Evelyn gathered her materials, rose, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Ms. Lindquist, the email I received confirming this interview mentioned that Vanguard's diversity metrics are part of your annual performance review. Increasing candidate pipeline diversity by 20% was a specific goal. Margot's face went very still. I imagine it's difficult to meet those metrics when qualified candidates keep having their interviews rescheduled, or when positions get filled internally right before external interviews. That must create some challenging paperwork. She opened the door, stepped through, did not look back. The elevator descended toward the lobby. Evelyn stood alone, watching the floor numbers tick down. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman who appeared calm, composed, unremarkable. The reflection was a lie. Inside, something was burning. The particular flame that ignites when you have been dismissed for who you are rather than what you have done. When your resume is impressive on paper, but your face tells them everything they need to know. When the system shows you exactly what you are worth in its eyes. She had felt this before. Many times. She would feel it again. But today was different. Today, she had a choice to make. The elevator opened on the lobby. She stepped out. Bryce Callahan was standing by the security desk. He was speaking with Torres, the guard who had processed her earlier. Their conversation stopped when they saw her. Torres's expression shifted to something that looked almost like relief. Bryce's face remained neutral, watching. Ms. Scott. He remembered her name. That was interesting. People like Bryce usually didn't bother to remember the names of people they had decided to dismiss. Mr. Callahan. How was your meeting? The question carried an edge. He already knew. Of course he knew. In a company this size, with his grip on operations this tight, nothing happened without his awareness. Informative. She began walking toward the exit. He fell into step beside her, matching her pace, the security guard watching. I understand there was some confusion about scheduling. Yes, the position was filled internally, before my interview, despite 3 email confirmations and a phone call. These things happen. Frequently? He stopped. She stopped. They stood facing each other in the lobby, morning light streaming through the glass walls, other employees moving around them like water around stones, none of them looking, all of them aware. Ms. Scott, let me be direct. This company has a specific vision, a specific culture. We hire people who fit that culture, who understand how we operate, who bring the right energy to the work. What energy would that be? The energy that builds companies, that takes risks, that moves fast and breaks things. I've built 3 product lines, managed teams of 50, delivered 9-figure revenue growth. On paper. That phrase again, the 2 words that erased everything she had done. I see. Evelyn adjusted her portfolio. Thank you for your directness, Mr. Callahan. It clarifies things. She turned toward the door. Miss Scott? She paused, did not turn around. If you're thinking about filing some kind of complaint, you should know that we have excellent legal counsel and an institutional memory for people who try to cause problems. Now she turned, looked at him, held his gaze. I appreciate the warning. Let me offer one in return. Institutional memory works both ways, and some institutions have longer memories than others. She walked out of the building, across the plaza, into the morning sun. Behind her, Bryce Callahan watched her go, his jaw tight, his hands loose at his sides, the posture of a man who had won but could not quite shake the feeling that something had just escaped his control. He pulled out his phone, dialed. It's me, the candidate from this morning, Evelyn Scott. I want everything. Background, employment history, connections. Find out who she is and why she's really here. Evelyn walked 3 blocks before stopping. A coffee shop on the corner. Small, quiet. The kind of place that attracted freelancers and remote workers rather than corporate refugees. She ordered black coffee, found a table near the back, sat down. For the first time since entering the Vanguard building, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened. The dismissal, the coded language, the threat delivered with a smile and an offer of excellent legal counsel. She had expected something like this, had prepared for it, but preparation and experience were different things. The body remembered humiliation even when the mind had planned for it. She opened her portfolio, removed the manila folder she had not touched in 4 months, set it on the table, did not open it. Her phone buzzed. Text message from a number saved as MW. How did it go? She typed back, as expected, worse in some ways, better in others. Do we proceed? Her fingers hovered over the screen. This was the moment, the decision that would change everything, forward or back, action or retreat. She thought about her grandmother, Bellamy-Scott, the woman who had started with nothing and built something, who had invested in a small technology company in 1998 because she believed in the founder's vision, even when everyone told her the internet was a fad, who had held that investment for 26 years through bubbles and crashes and board meetings she was never invited to attend, who had left everything to Evelyn in a trust that the company's current leadership had been working to minimize, to silence, to erase from the shareholder roles. 8 years without proper notification of meetings. 8 years without proxy materials. 8 years of systematic exclusion. Until 4 months ago, when Evelyn had finally gained access to her grandmother's records, had finally understood what she inherited, had finally seen the scale of what had been done, 34%. That was what Bellamy-Scott's original investment had become. 34% of Vanguard Meridian Tech, the largest individual stake in the company, larger than Bryce Callahan's 12%, larger than the institutional investors who thought they controlled the board, and none of them knew. Evelyn typed her response. We proceed. Sent, closed her phone, opened the folder. Inside were documents she had memorized but needed to see. Stock purchase agreement dated March 15, 1998. Trust documents establishing the Bellamy-Scott Family Trust. SEC Form 4 filings that showed her grandmother's original ownership. Proxy statements from meetings that had been held without notification to the trust's beneficiary. Shareholder communications returned as undeliverable to addresses that had been deliberately misrecorded. Evidence. 8 years of it. Enough to trigger an SEC investigation. Enough to force an emergency board meeting. Enough to end careers and collapse valuations and reshape the company her grandmother had helped build. But Evelyn had not come to destroy. She had come to understand, to see for herself who these people were when they thought they were dealing with someone powerless. Now she knew. Bryce Callahan was a bully who hid behind lawyers. Margot Lindquist was a gatekeeper who used culture as a weapon. The entire organization had been built on the assumption that certain people belonged and others did not. They had looked at Evelyn Scott and seen a candidate to be dismissed, a problem to be managed, a threat to be warned. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but they would learn. Soon. The offices of Webb, Chen, and Associates occupied the 14th floor of a building 4 blocks from Vanguard's headquarters. Evelyn arrived at 11:15, walking past a reception area that was deliberately understated. No marble, no motivational slogans, just clean lines and quiet competence. Marcus Webb met her in the conference room. Mid-30s, neat beard, the particular energy of an attorney who had chosen his practice because he believed in it, not because it paid best. "How bad?" Evelyn sat down, placed her portfolio on the table. "The CEO threatened me with legal action within 90 seconds of meeting me. The VP of Culture told me I wasn't a culture fit before asking a single question about my qualifications. They canceled my interview after confirming it 3 times. And the security guard made me wait 7 minutes while white visitors walked through untouched." Marcus nodded. Writing notes. Documented? Everything. Times, names, direct quotes where possible. Good. That's consistent with what we've gathered. He slid a folder across the table. Evelyn opened it. Inside were complaint files. 6 of them. Filed with the EEOC over the past 3 years, all involving Vanguard Meridian Tech, all involving candidates of color, all resolved through settlements that included non-disclosure agreements. "They have a pattern," Marcus said. "They know they have a pattern. That's why they settle quickly and quietly. Pay enough to make people go away. Make them sign papers that prevent them from talking." "What happened to the people who filed these complaints?" "Signed NDAs, moved on, found other jobs. Or didn't." He paused. 2 of them reached out after seeing our notice. They're willing to provide declarations if their identities are protected. That helps with the Title VII case. What about the shareholder exclusion? Marcus leaned back. That's where it gets complicated. SEC Rule 14A8 covers shareholder proposal exclusion, but your situation is broader. You weren't just excluded from proposing items. You were excluded from receiving any communication. No annual reports, no proxy materials, no meeting notices. For 8 years. Which violates what? Florida Statute Section 607.1601 gives shareholders the right to inspect corporate records. You were denied that right. Section 607.1602 covers the corporation's obligation to provide shareholder lists. They violated that too. And potentially SEC Rule 14 and 9, which prohibits materially misleading statements in proxy solicitations. By failing to disclose your grandmother's stake properly, they may have misled other shareholders about the company's ownership structure. What's the timeline? For the employment discrimination piece, we could file with the EEOC this week. Investigation takes 6 to 12 months typically. But with the documented pattern in the previous settlements, we might be able to accelerate. And the shareholder claims? Longer. SEC complaints can take years, but there's another option. Marcus pulled out a separate document. Florida corporate law allows shareholders holding more than 10% to demand a special meeting of shareholders. With 34%, you could demand that meeting tomorrow. Evelyn studied the document. And force a board vote. Exactly. On anything you want. CEO compensation, board composition, corporate governance reforms. Whatever you bring to the floor, 34% is enough to make them take it seriously. They'll claim the shares aren't properly registered, that the trust wasn't maintained correctly. They'll try, but you have the original documentation, the SEC filings from 1998, the trust amendments executed by your grandmother before her death. They can argue, but they can't win. The paper trail is too solid. Evelyn closed the folder, looked at Marcus. I didn't come here for money, or for revenge. I know. I came to see who these people are, to understand what they've built and who they've hurt building it, to document their behavior when they think no one with power is watching. Marcus nodded slowly. And now you know. Now I know. Bryce Callahan looks at a black woman in a simple blazer and sees a problem to be eliminated. Margot Lindquist hears a qualified candidate and reaches for euphemisms about culture fit. The entire organization operates on assumptions that certain people belong and others don't. So what do you want to do? Evelyn was silent for a long moment. The city spread out below them through the conference room windows, Tampa's skyline rising in the afternoon heat, the Vanguard building visible in the distance, 47 floors of ambition built on foundations that were rotting from within. I want them to understand what they've done, not just to me, to everyone they've dismissed, everyone they've silenced, everyone they've paid to go away quietly. That's going to require more than legal filings. I know. That's why I need something else from you. She reached into her portfolio, removed a single sheet of paper, placed it on the table between them. I need you to prepare notice for an emergency shareholder meeting, pursuant to Section 607.0702 of the Florida statutes, to be held within 30 days. Marcus picked up the paper, read it. His eyes widened. You want to demand a vote on CEO removal? Among other things, I want a full audit of shareholder communications over the past 10 years. I want an independent investigation into the pattern of employment discrimination. And I want a board seat. They'll fight you. Let them. Their legal team is massive. They have resources. So do I. Evelyn's voice was quiet, certain. They spent 8 years assuming that my grandmother's estate was powerless, that the trust was just paperwork they could ignore. They forgot that silence isn't the same as absence, and absence isn't the same as defeat. Marcus set down the paper, looked at her for a long moment. You know they're going to dig into everything, your history, your connections, anything they can use to discredit you. Let them dig. I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something. Then let them find it. Whatever they discover won't change the facts. 34%, 8 years of exclusion, a documented pattern of discrimination. Those things exist whether they like me or not. Marcus nodded, started writing notes. I'll have the notice prepared by end of business tomorrow. You'll need to provide proof of share ownership to accompany it. Certified copies of the trust documents. Statement from the transfer agent confirming your position. Already prepared. Everything's in my hotel safe. You planned this. I've been planning this for 4 months, since the day I finally understood what my grandmother left me. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been respect, or concern, or both. What happens after the notice is delivered? Evelyn stood, gathered her materials, looked out the window toward the Vanguard building in the distance. After the notice? Chaos. They'll realize who I am, what I hold, what I can demand. They'll panic, try to negotiate, try to threaten, try everything they've always tried when someone challenges their control. And what will you do? I'll watch, document. Let them show me exactly who they are when they're cornered. She turned to face Marcus. And then I'll decide whether this company deserves to survive, or whether it needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. She walked toward the door, paused. Marcus, one more thing. Yes? The name on the trust documents, Bellamy-Scott Family Trust. Don't include my name in the notice. Just the trust name and the share count. They'll figure it out eventually. Eventually, but not immediately. I want them to spend a few days wondering who is coming for them. Let them look at every black woman in every meeting and wonder if she's the one. Let them understand what it feels like to be watched and assessed and judged before you've said a single word. She opened the door, stepped through. I'll be in touch. Whoa. The hotel room was anonymous. Queen bed, corporate art. The particular beige of spaces designed to be forgotten. Evelyn had stayed in 100 rooms like this over the years. They all blurred together eventually. She set her bag on the desk, removed her blazer, hung it carefully in the closet. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel. The morning had been exhausting in ways that had nothing to do with physical effort. Every interaction at Vanguard had required calibration, careful modulation of tone and expression, the constant translation between what she felt and what she could safely show. This was the invisible labor that people like Bryce Callahan never had to perform. The constant calculation of whether honesty would be heard as aggression, whether directness would be interpreted as hostility, whether standing up for yourself would be used as evidence that you were the problem all along. She had done this her entire career, learned to be measured when she wanted to shout, learned to document when she wanted to confront, learned to build cases brick by brick, because single incidents were always dismissed as misunderstanding or sensitivity or inability to fit the culture. Today had been a single brick, but it was not going to be the last. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? Ms. Scott, this is Denise Okonkwo, CFO of Vanguard Meridian Tech. The voice was professional, controlled. But underneath, Evelyn detected something that might have been curiosity or wariness. Ms. Okonkwo, how did you get this number? You included it on your application materials. I hope you don't mind that I'm calling directly. That depends on why you're calling. A pause. The particular silence of someone choosing their words carefully. I understand you had an unusual experience in our offices this morning. I had an experience consistent with the 6 EEOC complaints filed against your company in the past 3 years. Unusual would have been if I had been treated with basic professional courtesy. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm calling because I believe there may have been some miscommunication. The position you applied for is still technically open. The internal candidate Mr. Callahan mentioned hasn't been formally offered the role. Mrs. Lindquist told me it was filled. Mrs. Lindquist may have been premature in that characterization. Evelyn processed this, the CFO calling directly, contradicting the VP of Culture. Something was happening inside that building, something she had set in motion without fully intending to. Why are you telling me this? Because I reviewed your application personally, after the confusion this morning. Your qualifications are exactly what we need for the strategic initiative we're planning. I would like to arrange a second meeting, a proper one this time, with appropriate participants. Which participants would those be? Myself? The head of product development? Possibly a board representative if we can arrange it quickly enough. Not Mr. Callahan? A beat. Mr. Callahan has many responsibilities. He's not typically involved in individual hiring decisions at this level. He was involved in mine, this morning, in the lobby. Silence. Ms. Scott, I'm offering you an opportunity, a chance to have the interview you were promised, with people who will evaluate you based on your qualifications, rather than other factors. Evelyn looked at herself in the hotel mirror. Simple clothes, natural hair, the face that had been judged insufficient before a single question was asked. Ms. Okonkwo, can I ask you something? Of course. How long have you been with Vanguard? 7 years? And in those 7 years, how many black women have been hired into senior strategy positions? The silence stretched. Answer enough. I appreciate your call, Evelyn said finally, and I appreciate that you're trying to fix something, but the problem isn't miscommunication. The problem is that your CEO looked at me and decided I didn't belong before I opened my mouth. The problem is that your VP of Culture had predetermined reasons for rejecting me that had nothing to do with my qualifications. The problem is systemic, and systems don't change because of second-chance interviews. Then what would change it? Accountability, transparency, consequences for the people who built and maintain the system. And yes, eventually, new hiring practices, and genuine cultural reform. But none of that happens while the current leadership believes they can handle these situations with quiet apologies and second chances. What are you going to do? It was a direct question. More direct than Evelyn expected from a CFO calling on behalf of a company that had just discriminated against her. I'm going to do what I always do, Ms. Okonkwo. Document. Evaluate. Make decisions based on evidence rather than assumptions. And when I have enough information, I'm going to act. That sounds like a warning. It's not. It's a description. Some people act based on emotion or impulse. I act based on preparation. Your company is about to learn the difference. She ended the call, set the phone down, looked at the manila folder still sitting on the desk. In approximately 36 hours, notice would be delivered to Vanguard Meridian Tech, demanding an emergency shareholder meeting. In approximately 72 hours, Bryce Callahan would discover that the black woman he had dismissed in his lobby owned more of his company than he did. And in the days and weeks that followed, everyone who had built their careers on the assumption that certain people didn't belong would have to reckon with the fact that belonging had never been the question. Power was the question, and power had just changed hands. Evening fell over Tampa. The city lights began their nightly emergence. Traffic hummed 16 floors below. Evelyn sat at the desk in her hotel room, laptop open, phone beside her. Documents spread across the surface in careful arrangement. Evidence organized by date, by severity, by the individuals responsible. She had done this work before, in other cities, with other companies. The documentation that precedes reckoning, the preparation that makes justice possible. But this time was different. This time, the stakes were personal. Her grandmother had never told her about the investment, had never mentioned Vanguard or technology or the small stake she had taken in 1998 when the company was nothing but an idea and a few engineers in a Tampa garage. Evelyn had learned about it only after Bellamy's death, going through papers in a storage unit that smelled like cedar and old books, finding documents that didn't make sense until she started making calls, asking questions, following a trail that led to lawyers and transfer agents, and eventually a realization that changed everything. Her grandmother had been a silent investor, had believed in something and wagered on it, and then stepped back to let it grow, had received dividends for years that she reinvested without fanfare, had watched the company go public and never told anyone that she held a position large enough to influence its direction. Why? Evelyn still didn't know. Her grandmother had died before those conversations could happen. A stroke in her sleep. Peaceful. Unexpected. And then the lawyers had called, and the documents had emerged, and the full picture had slowly become visible. 34%. Her grandmother had owned 34% of Vanguard Meridian Tech. And for 8 years after her death, the company had pretended that ownership didn't exist. No notifications, no proxy materials, no acknowledgement that the trust was entitled to participate in shareholder decisions. Just silence. Strategic. Deliberate. Designed to keep power consolidated among people who didn't want to share it. Evelyn understood now why Bryce Callahan had looked at her with such certainty this morning. He had spent a decade building a company on the assumption that he was in control, that no one could challenge his authority, that the shareholders who mattered were the ones who attended his meetings and voted his way and never asked questions about who else might have claims. He was wrong, and he was about to find out how wrong. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Webb. Notice prepared, ready for delivery tomorrow morning. She typed back, "Good. Include certified mail with receipt confirmation. I want documentation that they received it." Understood. Are you ready for what comes next? She considered the question. Ready was a complicated word. She had prepared, had gathered evidence and built arguments and anticipated counterattacks, had thought through the legal strategy and the media implications and the personal costs, but readiness implied certainty, and certainty was a luxury she couldn't afford. As ready as possible. The rest we handle as it comes. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts the hard part. She set the phone down, looked at the documents spread across the desk. The paper trail of 8 years of exclusion, the evidence that would reshape a company. Her grandmother had believed in something, had invested in a vision, and the people who inherited that vision had betrayed it. Now Evelyn was going to make them answer for it, not with violence, not with dramatics, but with documentation and procedure and the patient, relentless application of the law. They had looked at her and seen no one. They were about to discover their mistake. The next morning dawned gray and humid, Florida summer asserting itself despite the calendar's claim of late spring. Evelyn woke at 5:47, her body's habitual timing regardless of time zone or circumstance. She lay in the hotel bed for several minutes, running through the day ahead. The meetings, the calls, the confrontations that might or might not materialize. At 6:15, she showered, dressed in the same simple blazer and slacks from yesterday, applied minimal makeup, checked her reflection. She looked unremarkable. That was intentional. The woman they would underestimate, the candidate they would dismiss, the shareholder whose existence they would deny until the evidence became undeniable. At 7:30, her phone rang. Marcus Webb. Notice has been delivered. Certified mail. They signed for it at 7:22. How long before someone reads it? Hard to say. Could be minutes, could be hours. Depends on their internal mail routing and who recognizes the significance. What about the legal filings? EEOC complaint is being finalized. We'll submit electronically by end of business today. This EC complaint takes longer. I'm still coordinating with the securities attorneys. But the shareholder notice is the priority right now. Agreed. Keep me updated. She ended the call. Checked the time. 7:37. In some office at Vanguard Meridian Tech, an envelope was sitting in a mail pile, or on someone's desk, or in the hands of an assistant who didn't yet understand what it contained. 34%. The notice demanded a special meeting of shareholders within 30 days. The notice cited Section 607.0702 of the Florida statutes. The notice was signed on behalf of the Bellamy-Scott Family Trust. And somewhere, someone was about to have a very bad day. The Vanguard building hummed with its usual morning energy, employees streaming through the lobby, coffee cups clutched like talismans, the particular intensity of people who believed they were building something important. On the 37th floor in the executive suite, things were about to change. The mail arrived at 8:15. A stack of envelopes delivered to the executive assistant's desk. Most of it unremarkable. Vendor invoices, conference invitations, the routine paper that accumulated in any corporate headquarters. One envelope was different. Certified. Return receipt attached. Legal firm return address. The executive assistant, a woman named Patricia who had worked for Bryce Callahan for 12 years, opened it with the efficient indifference of someone who processed hundreds of documents daily. She read the first paragraph. Read it again. Her face went pale. At 8:19, she knocked on Bryce Callahan's office door. Mr. Callahan, you need to see this immediately. He was reviewing quarterly projections. Didn't look up. Leave it on the desk. Sir, it's urgent. Something in her voice made him raise his head. Patricia looked like someone who had seen a ghost, or worse. He took the document, read it. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the paper as if expecting the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Get Terrence in here, now, and Margot, and find out who the hell the Bellamy-Scott Family Trust is. Patricia retreated. The phone calls began. By 9 o'clock, the 37th floor was in chaos. Terrence Rowe arrived first, general counsel, 48 years old, the kind of lawyer who had built his career on finding loopholes and exploiting technicalities. He read the notice 3 times before speaking. This has to be a mistake. We have no record of this trust holding significant shares. Then where did they get 34% from? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Margot Lindquist arrived next. Her usual composure showed cracks. Who is behind this? Do we have a name? The notice is signed on behalf of the trust. No individual named, just a law firm, Webb, Chen, and Associates. I've never heard of them. Neither have I. But they clearly know corporate procedure. This notice is technically perfect. Every citation correct, every deadline specified. Bryce stood at his window, looking out at the city. His city, the company he had built, the empire he controlled. Someone is coming for us. We don't know that yet. This could be, "Don't patronize me." His voice was sharp, cold. 34%. That's larger than my stake. Larger than any institutional holder. Someone has been accumulating shares without us noticing. Someone has been planning this. We'll investigate. Find out who's behind the trust. Fight the meeting demand if necessary. Fight it how? You just said the notice is technically perfect. Terrence hesitated. There may be procedural challenges, questions about whether the trust was properly maintained, whether the current beneficiaries have standing. Then find those challenges, find them now, and find out who is doing this. He turned from the window, looked at his general counsel, at his VP of culture, the people he had trusted to protect him from exactly this kind of attack. Someone got past our defenses. Someone accumulated a controlling position while we weren't watching. Someone is about to demand a seat in my boardroom. His voice dropped. I want to know who. I want to know why. And I want to know what it takes to make them go away. The meeting broke. The lawyers began their research. The phones began to ring. And 16 floors below, in her hotel room, Evelyn Scott sat in silence, watching her phone for updates, knowing that the storm she had summoned was only beginning to gather strength. If you're invested in seeing how this plays out, smash that like button and subscribe. The next part is going to blow your mind. The investigation took less than 48 hours. Corporate genealogies are not difficult to trace when you have the resources of a Fortune 500 company's legal department. Trust documents, transfer agent records, probate filings from 2 years earlier. The trail led to a storage unit in Tampa, to a woman named Bellamy-Scott, deceased, who had made an investment in 1998 that no one had taken seriously, to a granddaughter who had inherited that investment and had, apparently, decided to do something with it. Terrence Rowe delivered the findings personally to Bryce Callahan's office at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon. The trust was established in 1998, original investment of $75,000. The founder, your founder, accepted it as part of an early angel round. I don't remember any Bellamy-Scott. You wouldn't. You joined the company in 2008. This was 10 years before your time. So who is she? Was. She died 2 years ago. The trust passed to her granddaughter, Evelyn Scott. The name hit Bryce like cold water. The candidate. From Monday. The same. She applied for the product strategy position 3 weeks ago. Interviewed, or attempted to interview, Monday morning. Bryce sat down slowly. The implications unfolding in his mind like a map of territory he had suddenly discovered he didn't control. She came here, sat in my lobby. Let me dismiss her. Let Margot reject her, all while knowing she owned more of this company than I do. It appears so. Why? What's her play? We don't know yet, but her attorney, Marcus Webb, has a reputation. Civil rights litigation, employment discrimination, securities violations. He doesn't take cases unless he thinks he can win them. She's going to sue us. Probably. The EEOC complaint was filed yesterday. Title VII violation. Pattern and practice of discriminatory hiring. She's not the only complainant. There are apparently others who've agreed to provide declarations. Bryce's jaw tightened. How many others? We're still determining that. But the previous settlements we signed were confidential. The settlements were confidential. The underlying facts weren't. If multiple people can demonstrate a pattern, the NDA signatories don't need to speak. The pattern speaks for itself. So we're facing an EEOC investigation, a shareholder meeting demand, and a woman with 34% who apparently has every reason to want us destroyed. That's an accurate summary. Bryce stood, walked to his window. The city spread below him. The company he had spent 15 years building, the empire that was suddenly more fragile than he had ever imagined. What do? We have options. We can challenge the meeting demand on procedural grounds, argue that the trust wasn't properly maintained during the years the beneficiary was unaware of its existence, question whether she has standing to make demands on behalf of shares she only recently discovered she owned. Will that work? Possibly. The law is complex. These cases can take months to resolve. Months during which she's in the press, talking about how we discriminated against her, talking about how we hid her inheritance from her, turning us into villains. Yes. What else? Terrence hesitated. We could negotiate, reach out directly, find out what she actually wants. She wants my head. Maybe, but maybe not. Money is usually the answer. Board representation. A settlement that lets everyone walk away quietly. She could have had money. The trust was generating dividends for years. She could have claimed those and never said a word. Instead, she showed up in my lobby and let me insult her to her face. Which suggests this is personal. Which suggests this is a problem money won't solve. Bryce turned from the window. His face had hardened into something that might have been resolve, or might have been fear wearing the mask of confidence. Call a board meeting. Tomorrow morning, emergency session. I want everyone there, and I want you to prepare a presentation on exactly what we're facing. Legal exposure, financial exposure, reputational exposure, everything. And if the board decides you're the exposure? The question hung in the air. The unspoken acknowledgement that Bryce's behavior on Monday morning, the dismissal, the threat, the casual cruelty, had created a problem that couldn't be explained away. Then we'll deal with that too. But I'm not going down without a fight. Not to some woman who thinks she can waltz into my building and take everything I've built. Terrence nodded, gathered his files, walked toward the door. Terrence. Yes? Find out everything about Evelyn Scott. Everything. Her history, her connections, her weaknesses. Everyone has something they want to hide. Find hers. Understood. The door closed. Bryce stood alone in his office, looking out at the city that was supposed to belong to him. Somewhere out there, a woman he had dismissed as irrelevant was preparing to upend his entire world, and he had no idea how to stop her. That evening, Evelyn sat in a different conference room, Marcus Webb's office, night falling outside the windows. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, Marcus said. Emergency session. My sources say Callahan is panicking. Good. Panic leads to mistakes. It also leads to desperate measures. They've hired a crisis management firm and private investigators. They're going to dig into every aspect of your life. Let them. I told you I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something. Then they'll have to decide whether what they find is worse than what I've already documented about them. 6 EEOC complaints. 8 years of shareholder exclusion. A CEO who threatened a candidate in the lobby of his own building. My secrets, whatever they are, don't erase their sins. Marcus studied her. You're very calm for someone about to be investigated by people with unlimited resources. I've spent my entire career being investigated. Every job I've ever held, someone has questioned whether I belonged, whether I was qualified, whether I got there through merit or through some diversity initiative designed to fill quotas. They've dug into my transcripts and my recommendations and my every professional decision. This is just more of the same. This is different. This is adversarial. All of it has been adversarial. The difference is, this time I have the power. 34% of a company that thought I was nobody. Documentation of discrimination that they thought would stay buried. And the resources to fight them as long as it takes. What do you want the end game to be? Evelyn considered the question. Outside, Tampa's lights sparkled against the gathering darkness. The city her grandmother had believed in. The company that had grown from nothing into something that mattered. I want accountability. For the people who excluded my grandmother's estate from proper notifications. For the executives who built a culture where discrimination was routine. For the CEO who looked at me and saw no one worth considering. Accountability looks different to different people. Yes. To some people it looks like money, settlements that make problems disappear. But that's not accountability. That's just expensive silence. So what does accountability look like to you? Change. Real change. Not press releases about diversity initiatives. Not mandatory training that everyone sleeps through. Actual structural reform. New leadership. New policies. New culture. A company that deserves the success it's achieved instead of one that achieved success despite being rotten at its core. That's ambitious. My grandmother invested in ambition. She saw something in this company 30 years ago that was worth betting on. I want to honor that by making sure her investment builds something worth building. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we keep pushing. The EEOC investigation will move forward. The SEC complaint will be filed, and the shareholder meeting will happen one way or another. And if they fight, we fight back, harder, longer, until they understand that this isn't going away, that I'm not going away. She stood, gathered her materials. Marcus, thank you for taking this case, for believing it mattered. I didn't take this case because I believed it mattered. I took it because cases like this are the only things that do matter. Everything else is just making money. This is making change. Evelyn smiled. For the first time in days, a genuine smile. Then let's make some change. The night deepened over Tampa. Evelyn walked back to her hotel through streets still warm from the day's sun. The city moved around her, cars and pedestrians and the anonymous flow of urban life. She thought about tomorrow. The board meeting she wouldn't attend but would shape. The decisions that would be made in rooms she wasn't allowed to enter. The ripples spreading outward from the notice that had been delivered 48 hours earlier. She thought about her grandmother, Bellamy-Scott, the woman who had taught her to stand straight, to speak clearly, to document everything because the truth only mattered if you could prove it. She thought about all the spaces she had entered where she wasn't welcome, all the interviews where her qualifications were questioned before they were reviewed, all the times she had been dismissed and overlooked and underestimated. And she thought about what came next. Tomorrow, the board would meet. They would discuss their options. They would panic and strategize and look for ways to make this problem disappear. But she wasn't a problem. She was a shareholder, the largest individual shareholder in their company, and she was done being invisible. The hotel lobby was quiet when she entered. Late night, most guests already in their rooms. She nodded to the desk clerk, a young woman who didn't look twice at her, who saw only another anonymous traveler in a building full of them. In her room, she prepared for bed, set alarms, laid out clothes for tomorrow, the rituals that anchored her to normalcy even when everything else was chaos. Before sleeping, she opened her grandmother's notebook, the worn leather cover soft under her fingers, the pages filled with handwriting she would never see again. On the inside cover, her grandmother had written a single phrase, "The truth will out. Our job is to help it." Evelyn closed the notebook, placed it on the nightstand, turned off the light. Tomorrow, the truth would begin to out, and she would be there to help it. End of Part 1. The board meeting is about to explode, and what happens next will change everything. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss Part 2, where Evelyn Scott walks into that boardroom and shows them exactly who they've been dealing with. The emergency board meeting convened at 8:47 a.m. in the executive conference room on the 47th floor of Vanguard Meridian Tech. 7 people sat around a table designed to seat 20. Bryce Callahan at the head, Terrence Rowe, General Counsel, to his immediate right, Margot Lindquist, VP of Culture, to his left, Denise Okonkwo, CFO, 3 seats down, the distance deliberate, the positioning noted. The remaining chairs held board members: Dale Hensley, 63, old money and older assumptions, Bryce's golf partner and longest ally; Victoria Marsh, 51, representing the institutional investors who held 18% collectively; and Raymond Cross, 44, the newest board member, appointed 6 months earlier after the company's IPO, still finding his footing in a room full of established power. The chair at the far end of the table remained empty, a reminder of the absence that had called this meeting into being. "Let's begin." Bryce's voice carried the particular edge of a man accustomed to control who felt it slipping. "Terrence, summarize where we are." Terrence opened a leather portfolio. The papers inside had been arranged and rearranged a dozen times since yesterday. None of the arrangements made the situation better. 3 days ago, we received notice demanding a special shareholder meeting pursuant to Florida Statute Section 607.0702. The demand was made on behalf of the Bellamy-Scott Family Trust, which claims to hold approximately 34% of the company's outstanding shares. Claims. Dale Hensley leaned forward. "You said claims. Are we disputing the legitimacy? We're investigating. But preliminary review suggests the ownership is valid. The trust was established in 1998 based on an original angel investment of $75,000. Over 26 years, through reinvestment of dividends and stock splits, that position grew to its current size. And no one noticed?" Victoria Marsh's voice was sharp. 34% of this company accumulated over 2 decades and no one in this room was aware? The trust was passive. It never voted, never attended meetings, never made demands or proposals. The dividends were reinvested automatically per the trust documents. There was no reason for anyone to pay attention. Until now. Raymond Cross cleared his throat. "Who is behind the trust? Who are we actually dealing with?" Terrence glanced at Bryce. The CEO's jaw tightened. "The current beneficiary is a woman named Evelyn Scott, granddaughter of the original investor, Bellamy-Scott. She inherited the trust 2 years ago following her grandmother's death. Based on our investigation, she only recently became aware of the full scope of her inheritance." "Recently meaning when?" 4 months ago, approximately. She's been preparing since then." "Preparing for what?" Bryce answered before Terrence could. "War. She's been preparing for war." The word landed heavily in the conference room. Victoria Marsh set down her pen. "Explain." 3 weeks ago, Evelyn Scott applied for a position in our product strategy division. Senior level. She went through the standard application process, received confirmation of an interview scheduled for last Monday. And? Bryce's pause was microscopically too long. There were complications with the interview process, miscommunication about scheduling. She was informed the position had been filled internally. Was it? Not formally, but... So we rejected a qualified candidate who happened to be the company's largest individual shareholder. Victoria's voice could have frozen water. Without knowing who she was. And now she's demanding a meeting that could reshape this entire organization. She didn't identify herself. She came in under false pretenses. She came in using her legal name and applied through standard channels. That's not false pretenses. That's an application. Dale Hensley raised a hand. "Let's not get distracted by semantics. The question is what she wants and what we're prepared to offer to make this go away." "That's exactly the question." Denise Okonkwo spoke for the first time. Her voice was measured, careful. "And I think we need to be honest about what we're actually facing." All eyes turned to the CFO. She had been quiet throughout Terrence's presentation, taking notes, her expression unreadable. "We're not just facing a shareholder demand. We're facing an EEOC complaint filed 2 days ago, alleging a pattern and practice of discriminatory hiring. We're facing potential SEC scrutiny for failing to properly notify a major shareholder of meetings and proxy materials for 8 years. And we're facing a woman who spent 4 months preparing for exactly this moment, while we had no idea she existed." "You seem well informed." Bryce's voice carried an edge. "I called her." Silence. Absolute. "You did what?" "After the interview situation on Monday, I reviewed her application materials. Her qualifications were exceptional. I wanted to understand what had happened and whether we could salvage the situation. Without consulting me." "You were the situation that needed salvaging, Bryce." Denise's voice didn't waver. You threatened her in the lobby. Margot told her she wasn't a culture fit before asking a single substantive question. We handed her evidence of discrimination on a silver platter, and she was already positioned to use it. She was spying on us. She was observing how we treat people. There's a difference. The room fractured into competing tensions. Dale Hensley aligned with Bryce, his posture protective. Victoria Marsh watched Denise with something that might have been respect. Raymond Cross looked like a man who had wandered into a firefight without armor. "What did she say?" Victoria asked. "When you called her?" "She said she came to see who we are, to understand what we've built and who we've hurt building it. She said systems don't change because of second-chance interviews." What would change them? Accountability, transparency, consequences. Consequences for whom? Denise looked directly at Bryce. The answer was obvious. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Legal strategies were discussed and dismissed. Public relations approaches were considered and rejected. The fundamental problem remained. Evelyn Scott held 34% of the company, had documented evidence of discrimination, and showed no signs of being interested in a quiet settlement. At 11:52, Terrence's phone buzzed. He read the message. His face went pale. "We have another problem." "What now?" "The SEC. They've received a complaint, shareholder notification violations. They're opening a preliminary inquiry." The room went very still. "How preliminary?" "Preliminary enough that they're requesting documents. 8 years of shareholder communications, proxy materials, meeting notices, everything." She moved fast. Victoria Marsh's voice held something that might have been admiration or recognition of a worthy opponent. "She's been moving for 4 months. We just didn't see it." Bryce stood, walked to the window. The city spread below, the empire he had spent 15 years building, the company that bore his vision in every product and every policy. "Schedule a call with her attorneys, today if possible. I want to know what it would take to make this stop." "And if she doesn't want to stop?" "Everyone wants something. Find out what she wants." "Bryce." Denise's voice was quiet, careful. "What if what she wants is you?" He didn't turn from the window. "Then she'll have to fight for it." If you think this is intense, wait until you see what happens next. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. The real confrontation is just getting started. The law offices of Webb, Chen, and Associates received the call at 2:17 p.m. Marcus Webb listened, made notes, asked clarifying questions. When he hung up, he walked to the conference room where Evelyn sat reviewing documents. They want to negotiate. Already? The SEC inquiry scared them, and the board is fracturing. My source says the CFO is pushing for a different approach than Callahan wants. Denise Okonkwo. She called me Monday night. I know. She's positioning herself as the reasonable alternative, the person who saw the problem and tried to fix it. Did she try to fix it? She called you. That's more than anyone else did. Evelyn set down the document she had been reading. What are they offering? They want to know what you want. A meeting. Preliminary discussions. No commitments on either side. Where? Neutral ground. They suggested their law firm's offices. I counter-suggested here. They won't agree to that. They did. 4 o'clock today. Callahan, their general counsel, and 1 board representative. They specifically requested that no media be present. Evelyn considered this. The speed of their response. The willingness to come to her territory. The desperation implicit in both. They're afraid. They should be. Your position is strong. The documentation is solid. And they know that every day this drags on, the exposure grows. What do you recommend? Hear them out. See what they're willing to concede. But don't agree to anything today. Let them make offers. Let them show their hand. The more they talk, the more they reveal about what they're actually afraid of. Evelyn nodded. 4 o'clock then. She returned to her documents. The evidence of 8 years of exclusion, the records that would reshape a company, In approximately 90 minutes, she would sit across from the man who had dismissed her in his lobby, who had looked at her and seen no one worth considering, who had built an empire on the assumption that certain people didn't belong. She wondered if he understood yet how wrong he had been. The conference room at Webb, Chen and Associates was deliberately modest. Functional furniture, plain walls, the kind of space that suggested substance over style. Evelyn arrived at 3:45, sat at one end of the table, reviewed her notes, centered herself. At 3:58, Marcus entered. "They're here, Callahan, Terrence Rowe, and Dale Hensley." "The board member?" "Old money, longest ally. Probably here to handle Callahan if he loses his temper." "Or to intimidate me." "That too." "Show them in." The door opened. 3 men entered. Bryce Callahan first, because Bryce Callahan always entered first. His suit was immaculate, his posture aggressive. The body language of a man who intended to dominate any room he occupied. Behind him, Terrence Rowe carried a briefcase. His expression was carefully neutral, the professional mask of a lawyer who had learned to hide his thoughts. Dale Hensley came last. Silver-haired, patrician, the particular confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to any space he occupied. They saw Evelyn, the woman from the lobby, the candidate they had dismissed, the shareholder they had ignored. Bryce's step faltered, just for a moment. Then he recovered, continued to the table, sat down across from her. "Miss Scott?" "Mr. Callahan." The formality was deliberate on both sides. Professional distance maintained despite everything that had already passed between them. Marcus took the seat beside Evelyn. "Shall we begin?" Terrence opened his briefcase. "We appreciate your willingness to meet on short notice. Our hope is that we can find a resolution that serves everyone's interests." "What resolution did you have in mind?" "That depends on what Ms. Scott is seeking. We understand there are concerns about how the interview process was handled. We're prepared to discuss those concerns." The interview is one issue. The 8 years of shareholder exclusion is another. The pattern of discrimination documented in multiple EEOC complaints is a third. Which would you like to start with? Terrence's smile remained fixed. "Perhaps we should establish some parameters. What outcome would satisfy Ms. Scott's concerns?" Evelyn looked at him, then at Dale Hensley, then at Bryce Callahan. "I want accountability." Accountability can mean many things. It means consequences for the people responsible. It means structural changes to prevent future violations. It means transparency about what happened and why. "You want money." This from Bryce, his first words since they sat down. "Money is compensation. It's not accountability." "Everyone wants money. That's what this is about. You inherited some shares you didn't know about, and now you're looking for a payday." "Mr. Callahan," Marcus's voice was sharp, "that characterization is inaccurate and unhelpful." "Is it? She shows up pretending to be a job candidate, lets us reject her, then springs this shareholder demand like it wasn't planned from the beginning. This is extortion. It's not extortion to exercise rights guaranteed by Florida corporate law. And it's not pretending to be a candidate to apply for a position using your legal name through standard channels. She didn't disclose who she was. She disclosed exactly what any candidate discloses: her qualifications, her experience, her contact information. The fact that she also happened to be a shareholder was not required on the application." Dale Hensley raised a hand. "Let's step back. We're here to find common ground, not to relitigate Monday's events. Monday's events are central to the EEOC complaint. Then let's focus on the shareholder issues. Ms. Scott, you've demanded a special meeting. What do you intend to propose at that meeting?" Evelyn considered the question. How much to reveal? How much to hold back? "I intend to propose a full audit of shareholder communications for the past 10 years. I intend to propose an independent investigation into the pattern of employment discrimination. And I intend to propose changes to board composition." Changes meaning what? meaning my grandmother invested in this company when it was nothing. She believed in its potential. She deserves representation at the table where decisions are made. You want a board seat. I want the seat my shares entitle me to demand. Bryce laughed. The sound was harsh, disbelieving. You walk in here after 3 days and expect a board seat? Do you have any idea what it takes to run a company like this? I have 15 years of product strategy experience. I have an MBA from Wharton. I have led teams at 3 Fortune 500 companies and delivered 9-figure revenue growth at each one. What I don't have is the willingness to be dismissed by someone who didn't bother to look at my resume before deciding I didn't belong. Your qualifications weren't the issue. Then what was? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the room knew the answer. No one wanted to say it out loud. Terrence cleared his throat. Perhaps we could discuss the shareholder notification concerns. If there were administrative failures in past communications, we're prepared to address those. Administrative failures. Evelyn's voice was flat. Is that what we're calling it? 8 years of deliberately excluding a major shareholder from proxy materials and meeting notices? We're not conceding deliberate exclusion, but if there were systemic issues with how certain accounts were processed, the trust address was changed in your records 3 times. Each time, it was changed to addresses that didn't exist. Postal codes that were 1 digit off, street numbers that were transposed. That's not a systemic issue. That's a pattern. You're alleging intentional conduct. I'm documenting what happened. You can characterize it however you like. But when the SEC reviews those records, they'll draw their own conclusions. The room shifted, the mention of SEC review changing the temperature. Dale Hensley leaned forward. Ms. Scott, let's be practical. You have shares. We have a company. Neither of us benefits from prolonged conflict. What would it take to resolve this matter completely? A number, a position, whatever you need to feel that justice has been served. Justice isn't served by settlement checks and non-disclosure agreements. Justice is served by accountability. Accountability for whom specifically? Evelyn looked at Bryce Callahan, held his gaze. I think we both know the answer to that. Chuck. The meeting ended without resolution. Positions stated but not reconciled. The gap between what Evelyn wanted and what they were willing to offer measured not in dollars, but in fundamental disagreements about what had happened and who was responsible. After they left, Marcus poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of Evelyn. Well? They're not ready to concede anything meaningful. Callahan still thinks he can make this go away with money and threats. And Hensley? He's worried. I saw it in his face when I mentioned the SEC. He knows what a federal investigation means for institutional investors, for share prices, for everything they've built. What about Rowe, the general counsel? He's doing his job, protecting his client. But he knows the legal exposure is real. He's already thinking about how to limit damage when things go wrong. Marcus nodded. So we proceed. The shareholder meeting demand stands. The EEOC investigation continues. The SEC inquiry moves forward. And we add one more element. What's that? Evelyn removed a folder from her portfolio, placed it on the table. Discovery. On Tuesday, I want you to file a formal demand for inspection of corporate records pursuant to Section 607.1602 of the Florida statutes. I want all internal communications regarding the Bellamy-Scott Family Trust for the past 10 years. I want all documents relating to shareholder notifications for accounts flagged as inactive or address unknown. And I want all personnel files and evaluation materials for the 6 candidates who filed EEOC complaints. They'll fight it. Let them. Every day they fight is another day of legal fees, another day of negative publicity, another day of board members wondering whether backing Callahan is worth the cost. You're trying to exhaust them. I'm trying to show them that this doesn't end until they choose to end it properly, until they accept that what they did was wrong and take steps to fix it. Marcus studied her. This could take months, years potentially. Are you prepared for that? My grandmother held those shares for 26 years without demanding anything. She trusted that the company would do right by her investment. They didn't. I have time to make sure they understand what that betrayal cost them. And if they offer something substantial? A real seat at the table? Real reforms? Real accountability for specific individuals? Evelyn considered. The question she had been asking herself since this began. What would be enough? What would allow her to step back and say that justice had been served? Then we evaluate. But I won't accept performative gestures. I won't accept settlements that silence victims. And I won't accept reforms that have no enforcement mechanisms. She paused. They need to understand that this isn't going away because they want it to. It goes away when they've actually changed. What if they're not capable of changing? Then we change them for them, one board vote at a time. The next 48 hours brought escalation on all fronts. The SEC inquiry expanded. Document requests multiplied. Vanguard's legal team was working around the clock, pulling records, reviewing communications, trying to understand the full scope of potential exposure. The EEOC investigation moved forward. 2 additional complainants came forward, former candidates who had experienced treatment similar to Evelyn's. Their declarations were added to the file. The pattern of discrimination grew clearer with each new account, and within Vanguard itself, the board began to fracture. Victoria Marsh requested an emergency call with Dale Hensley. Their conversation, though private, was reconstructed later from multiple sources. This is untenable. Victoria's voice carried the particular edge of someone protecting a significant financial investment. Every day this continues, the company's value decreases. Institutional investors are asking questions. Analysts are downgrading their forecasts. Bryce is handling it. Bryce is the problem. His conduct on Monday is at the center of the EEOC complaint. His fingerprints are all over the shareholder exclusion issue. As long as he's defending himself, he can't effectively lead the company. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we consider alternatives. Leadership transition. Negotiated departure. Whatever minimizes exposure and allows the company to move forward. You want to fire him? I want to protect the value of my client's investment, which is my fiduciary duty, which should be yours as well. Dale's silence stretched. He had known Bryce for 20 years, had golfed with him, dined with him, celebrated with him when the company went public. Loyalty was currency in their world, but so was survival. What does she want? Scott, what would make her go away? According to Denise, she wants accountability. Real changes, not settlements that disappear into NDAs. Everyone has a price. Not everyone. Some people want something money can't buy. Like what? Like watching powerful men face consequences for what they've done. Like proving that the system can be made to work. Like honoring her grandmother's memory by fixing what was broken. That's naive. Maybe, but naive people are dangerous. They don't negotiate like rational actors. They don't accept compromises that would satisfy normal people. They hold out for things that seem impossible until suddenly they're not. Dale considered this. The meeting room at Webb, Chen and Associates. Evelyn Scott sitting at the end of the table, calm, prepared, unmoved by Bryce's bluster. She hadn't seemed naive. She had seemed patient, like someone who had already calculated the odds and decided they were in her favor. Talk to the other board members, quietly. Find out where they stand. You're authorizing that? I'm acknowledging reality. If Bryce can't resolve this in the next 72 hours, we may need to consider other options. The countdown had begun. 72 hours. 3 days for Bryce Callahan to solve a problem that had been building for 8 years. He spent the first day making calls. Investors he had cultivated. Contacts he had developed. The network of influence he had built over 15 years. Every conversation ended the same way. Concern about the situation. Caution about the exposure. questions about why this had been allowed to happen. No one offered solutions. No one volunteered support. The isolation was already beginning. The second day, he turned to more aggressive measures. "I want everything on her." His voice was hard, his eyes harder. The private investigator sitting across his desk nodded slowly. Everything meaning what, specifically? Financial records, employment history, personal relationships, anything that could be used as leverage, anything that suggests she's not what she seems. That's a broad scope. I'm paying for broad scope. The investigator, a former FBI agent named Crawford, who had built a lucrative second career on the mistakes of others, made notes. "What's the timeline?" 48 hours. "That's aggressive. That's what I'm paying for." Crawford left. Bryce sat alone in his office, looking at the city he had claimed, the empire he had built, the kingdom that was slipping from his grasp. He had been challenged before, by competitors, by board members, by market forces that tried to crush what he was building. He had survived every challenge through the same combination of aggression and persistence that had defined his entire career. But this was different. This enemy had been invisible for 8 years, had accumulated power in silence, had appeared in his lobby disguised as no one and revealed herself as everything. He didn't know how to fight someone who had already won before the battle began. On the third day, Crawford delivered his report. Evelyn Scott, 42 years old, born in Philadelphia. Father deceased when she was 12. Mother remarried, moved to Tampa, where young Evelyn grew up in her grandmother's shadow. Undergraduate degree from Spelman College, MBA from Wharton. A career trajectory that zigzagged through 3 major technology companies: product manager, senior director, vice president of strategy. Each departure marked by glowing references and vague explanations about seeking new challenges. No criminal record, no civil judgments, no scandals, no affairs, no addictions, no financial problems. The woman was clean. Frustratingly, impossibly clean. "This is everything?" Bryce stared at the thin file. "Everything I could find in 48 hours. She's careful, disciplined, the kind of person who doesn't leave traces." "Everyone leaves traces." "Not everyone. Some people learn early that documentation works both ways. They keep records of others while protecting themselves." "Then find her records. Find what she's hiding." Crawford paused. "Mr. Callahan, in my experience, the kind of person who builds a case this methodically isn't hiding anything. They're not afraid of exposure because there's nothing to expose. They've spent their whole life being examined and judged, and they've learned to be bulletproof." "No one is bulletproof." "Maybe not, but some people are harder to hit than others, and the effort you spend trying to find ammunition against her is time and money that could be spent resolving the actual issues." Bryce dismissed him. Sat alone with the useless file, the clean record, the unblemished history. He had expected dirt, expected secrets, expected the kind of leverage that allowed powerful men to escape consequences for decades. Instead, he had found nothing, and nothing was the worst possible finding. This is where everything starts to unravel. If you want to see the CEO face real consequences, smash that subscribe button. The reveal is coming. The special shareholder meeting was scheduled for 18 days after the initial demand. Florida law allowed corporations 30 days to comply. Vanguard's board, facing mounting pressure, chose to accelerate the timeline. The meeting would be held in the company's headquarters. Main Conference Center. Capacity for 200 attendees. Every seat was expected to be filled. In the days leading up to the meeting, Evelyn continued her preparation, reviewed documents, coordinated with Marcus and his team, gave interviews to 2 business journalists who had been tracking the story. Careful interviews, on the record, designed to establish her narrative before Vanguard could define it. The media coverage was growing. Tech news sites picked up the story first, then business publications, then mainstream outlets that smelled blood in the water. Black woman investor challenges, tech CEO after interview discrimination. Hidden shareholder emerges to demand accountability at Vanguard Tech. SEC opens inquiry into shareholder notification violations at Tampa Company. Each headline was another crack in the foundation. Each story, another piece of the pressure building towards something that could not be contained. Inside Vanguard, the fractures had become chasms. Victoria Marsh demanded a private meeting with Bryce Callahan. It occurred in his office 3 days before the shareholder meeting at 7 a.m. when no one else was in the building. The institutional investors are withdrawing support. Bryce didn't look up from his desk. Which ones? All of them. The 18% we hold collectively. If Scott's proposals come to a vote, we'll abstain or vote against you. Now he looked up. Against me? Against your continued leadership. The exposure is too great. The risk to our portfolios is too significant. I built this company. And we invested in it. Our obligation is to our clients, not to your legacy. Bryce stood, walked to the window. The familiar view. The city that was supposed to be his. What do you want me to do? Resign, before the meeting. Frame it as a personal decision. Spend more time with family. Health concerns. Whatever story preserves your dignity. And if I don't? Then we vote to remove you, and the story becomes about a CEO who was fired for discrimination. Which version would you prefer in your biography? The choice was no choice at all, but Bryce Callahan had never been good at accepting defeat. Give me until the meeting. Let me try one more thing. What thing? Let me talk to her directly, alone, without lawyers and board members and everyone else who has an agenda. Let me understand what she really wants. Victoria studied him. You think you can negotiate your way out of this? I think I deserve the chance to try. You had a chance, Monday morning. You chose to threaten her instead. That was before I knew who she was. That's exactly the point, Bryce. You didn't treat her badly because of who she was. You treated her badly because of what you assumed about who she wasn't. That's the whole problem. That's what she's exposing. Bryce had no answer for that. The truth was too clear to argue with. Victoria left. The door closed behind her, and Bryce Callahan, for the first time in 15 years, understood that he might have already lost. The request came through Marcus Webb's office at 2 p.m. the same day. He wants to meet with her alone, no lawyers, no witnesses, tomorrow morning. Evelyn considered, the desperation implicit in the request, the danger of a one-on-one conversation with no documentation. Where? He suggested a restaurant, neutral ground. Too public. I want this conversation on record. Then you'll need to wear a wire, or insist on a recorded phone call. I'll meet him in person, but in a space I control, my hotel, the business center. I'll ensure recording capability. Is that legal in Florida? Florida is a two-party consent state. I'll inform him at the start of the meeting that I'm recording. If he objects, he can leave. He won't like that. He doesn't have to like it. He has to accept it. Marcus made the arrangements. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. the following day. 24 hours before the shareholder meeting would begin. Evelyn slept poorly that night. Not from anxiety, she had prepared too thoroughly for anxiety, but from anticipation. The sense that something decisive was approaching, that 18 days of pressure were about to resolve into a single conversation. She woke at 5:42, showered, dressed in the same simple blazer she had worn to her interview, the same modest slacks, the same minimal jewelry. She was not going to be anyone other than who she had always been. At 9:45, she was in the hotel's business center, a small conference room with a table for 4. She had tested the recording equipment twice, checked the lighting, positioned herself at the end of the table facing the door. At 9:58, Bryce Callahan entered. He looked older than he had 2 weeks earlier, the stress visible in lines around his eyes, in the tension of his shoulders. The arrogance was still there, would probably always be there, but it was tempered now by something that might have been fear. He saw the recording device on the table, stopped. What's that? A recording device. I'm informing you that this conversation is being recorded. If you're not comfortable with that, you're welcome to leave. That's not what I agreed to. You agreed to meet with me alone. No lawyers, no witnesses. This is what alone looks like when you've already demonstrated that you can't be trusted. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would leave, would let pride overcome necessity. But he didn't leave. He walked to the table, sat down across from her. Recording or not, I need to say some things. Then say them. He took a breath, let it out. The preparation of someone who had rehearsed what came next. I made mistakes. The way I handled Monday, the things I said, I was wrong. Go on. I looked at you and made assumptions about who you were, about why you were there, about whether you belonged. Those assumptions were based on things that shouldn't have mattered. You mean my race. The word landed between them, direct, unavoidable. Among other things, the way you were dressed, the fact that you didn't look like the candidates we usually interview. I let those factors influence my judgment. That's called discrimination, Mr. Callahan. I know what it's called. Do you? Because your general counsel has spent 2 weeks denying that discrimination occurred. Your VP of Culture has filed a statement claiming that the interview rejection was based on legitimate business concerns, and your board members have been telling the media that this is all a misunderstanding. They're protecting the company. They're protecting you, which is the same thing as long as you're in charge. Bryce leaned forward. What do you want? A resignation? Money? Board seats? Name it. Whatever ends this, I'm prepared to discuss. Evelyn studied him, the desperation visible beneath the rehearsed contrition, the calculations still running behind his eyes. I want to understand something first. The 8 years of shareholder exclusion, the missing proxy materials, the address changes. Was that deliberate? I didn't know about it. That's not what I asked. I asked if it was deliberate. A pause, the moment where truth and self-preservation fought for control. I don't know. Some of the people who handled shareholder relations in the early years, they're not with the company anymore. The records are incomplete. The records I've obtained suggest otherwise. The address changes were made using credentials that belong to specific individuals who are still employed by Vanguard. If that's true, we'll investigate. We'll hold people accountable. You'll hold people accountable, but not yourself. I didn't know. You created a culture where certain people were considered less important than others, where exclusion was normalized, where problems were solved by making them disappear rather than addressing them. The specific actions may have been taken by subordinates, but the environment that allowed those actions came from you. Bryce's face hardened, the contrition sliding away, replaced by the aggression that was more natural to him. So this is personal. This has nothing to do with corporate governance or shareholder rights. This is about punishing me for how I treated you. This is about accountability. You want it to be personal because that makes me the villain, the angry black woman with a grudge. But my feelings about you don't change the facts. 8 years of exclusion. 6 EEOC complaints. A pattern of discrimination that you either created or allowed to flourish. Those facts exist whether I'm angry or not. And what facts exist about you? About your real agenda here? My agenda is exactly what I've stated. Accountability, transparency, reform. No one does what you've done. The months of preparation, the legal strategy, the media management, just for abstract principles. You want something specific. What is it? Evelyn considered the question, what she wanted, why she had done this, the months of planning and the reasons behind them. When I was 12 years old, my father died. Heart attack. No warning. There one day, gone the next. My mother remarried and moved us to Tampa to be closer to my grandmother. Bellamy-Scott. Bryce said nothing. Waited. My grandmother was the most disciplined person I ever knew. She kept records of everything, every conversation, every transaction, every promise made and broken. She taught me that documentation was survival, that the truth only mattered if you could prove it. What does this have to do with? She invested in your company when it was nothing, believed in your founder's vision when most people thought the internet was a fad. She held that investment for 26 years without demanding anything, without attending a single meeting, without ever asserting her rights as a shareholder. Passive investors don't usually assert rights. That's what makes them passive. She wasn't passive. She was patient. She was waiting to see if the company deserved her faith, if the people running it would honor the trust she had placed in them. And when she died, I found her records. 26 years of documentation, dividend notices, stock certificates, communications from the company that stopped arriving in 2015 and were never explained. She had noted every missing statement, every undelivered proxy, every meeting she should have been invited to but wasn't. Evelyn paused. Let the silence build. She wrote a note in her final journal entry, 3 weeks before she died. They forgot about me. They decided I didn't matter. Someone should remind them that forgetting doesn't erase. It just postpones. She was talking about us. She was talking about everyone who assumes that silence means absence, who takes advantage of people they think can't fight back, who builds empires on the assumption that certain voices don't need to be heard. And you're here to remind us. I'm here to make sure she was right, that forgetting just postpones, that the bill eventually comes due. Bryce sat back, studied her, for the first time, something other than calculation or aggression in his eyes. You really aren't going to take a settlement. Not the kind you're offering. What kind would you take? I told you at the meeting. Accountability, real changes, consequences for the people responsible. Meaning me. Meaning you, and Margot Lindquist, and whoever falsified the shareholder records, and everyone who built or maintained a system designed to exclude people like my grandmother, like me, like the 6 candidates who filed complaints before I ever arrived. You're asking me to end my own career. I'm asking you to take responsibility for what you've done. How you end your career is up to you. The silence stretched. Bryce looked at the recording device, at Evelyn, at the room around them, modest and ordinary, nothing like the corporate towers where he was used to conducting negotiations. If I resign, step down before the meeting, would that satisfy you? It would be a start. What else? Board representation, real authority to oversee reforms, access to all records related to the shareholder exclusion, and settlement discussions with the EEOC that don't include NDAs. You want victims to be able to talk. I want victims to be free to tell their stories if they choose. Silence should be a choice, not a requirement. Bryce stood, walked to the window, the Tampa skyline visible in the distance. I spent 15 years building something that changed the world, that created jobs, that generated wealth, that mattered. And in the process, you hurt people, excluded people, made decisions that prioritized your power over their rights. Everyone makes decisions like that. Every CEO, every leader. You can't build something significant without casualties. But you don't have to pretend the casualties don't matter. You don't have to hide them, silence them, make them sign agreements that prevent them from ever telling anyone what happened. That's how business works. That's how your business works. It doesn't have to be that way. He turned to face her. 15 years of building, 15 years of control, 15 years of being the one who decided. You're asking me to give up everything. I'm asking you to accept consequences. What you built doesn't disappear. The company continues. The employees keep their jobs. The shareholders retain their value, more value probably, once the legal exposure is resolved. But I'm not there to see it. No, you're not. Bryce Callahan looked at Evelyn Scott, the woman he had dismissed, the shareholder he had ignored, the problem he couldn't solve by any of the methods he knew. I'll think about it. Think quickly. The meeting is tomorrow. He walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, I underestimated you. From the moment you walked into my lobby, I know. It won't happen again. No, it won't. He left. The door closed. Evelyn sat alone with the recording device and the silence and the knowledge that everything she had worked for was about to be tested. The shareholder meeting convened at 9 a.m. on a Thursday that felt heavier than its date would suggest. The conference center was full. Shareholders, board members, legal representatives, media observers relegated to a designated section at the back. The air hummed with tension and expectation. Evelyn arrived at 8:45, took her seat in the front row, Marcus Webb beside her. The portfolio in her lap contained everything: documents, evidence, the receipts that would reshape a company. At 8:57, the board members entered through a side door: Dale Hensley, Victoria Marsh, Raymond Cross, Denise Okonkwo, others whose names Evelyn had memorized from the company's filings. At 8:59, Bryce Callahan entered. He looked different. The aggression that usually animated him was absent. Something else had taken its place. Resignation, perhaps, or the particular calm of someone who had finally accepted what was coming. He walked to the front of the room, did not take his usual seat at the center of the board table. Instead, he stood before the assembled shareholders, hands at his sides, facing the crowd. Before we begin the formal agenda, I have an announcement. The room went silent, phones raised, recorders activated. Effective immediately, I am resigning as Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Meridian Tech. The murmur that went through the crowd was like a wave: shock, disbelief, satisfaction, the sound of power changing hands. Recent events have made clear that my leadership has created obstacles to the company's progress. The concerns raised about shareholder communications, employment practices, and corporate culture are legitimate. They require attention that I am not in a position to provide. He paused, found Evelyn in the front row, held her gaze. I am not admitting to every allegation that has been made, but I am acknowledging that my conduct fell short of the standards this company should uphold. I let assumptions and prejudices influence my judgment. I created an environment where exclusion was tolerated. Those failures are mine. The board will announce interim leadership today. Full restructuring will follow. I ask that shareholders give the new leadership the time and support necessary to address these challenges. He stepped back, did not wait for questions, walked toward the side door. As he passed Evelyn's row, he stopped, turned, the room watching, the cameras capturing. Miss Scott. Mr. Callahan. You win. This was never about winning. It was about accountability. Same thing. Not from where I'm sitting. He nodded once, continued walking, disappeared through the side door. And Evelyn Scott, granddaughter of Bellamy-Scott, largest individual shareholder of Vanguard Meridian Tech, prepared for the work that remained. The rest of the meeting proceeded in an atmosphere of controlled chaos. Denise Okonkwo was named interim CEO. Her first act was to read a statement acknowledging the shareholder notification failures and committing to a full audit. Evelyn was granted a seat on the board, not the observer position she had initially requested, a full voting seat with all the authority that implied. The EEOC investigation would continue. No settlements would include non-disclosure requirements. Victims who wished to speak would be free to speak, and a special committee would be formed to review all employment practices, all hiring decisions, all aspects of corporate culture that had allowed discrimination to flourish. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect. But it was a beginning. That evening, Evelyn sat alone in her hotel room, the documents spread across the desk one final time, the leather notebook with her grandmother's initials resting beside them. She had won. By every measure that mattered, she had achieved what she set out to achieve. Bryce Callahan was gone. The board had been reformed. The company was committed to changes that would take years to fully implement, but had finally begun. And yet, she opened her grandmother's notebook to the final entry. The words written 3 weeks before Bellamy-Scott's death. They forgot about me. They decided I didn't matter. Someone should remind them that forgetting doesn't erase. It just postpones. Below that, in different ink, added later, perhaps during a sleepless night, 2 more lines. But remember, Evie, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making things right. Leave room for people to grow. Leave room for them to change. Some won't, but some might. And the ones who might deserve the chance. Evelyn closed the notebook, set it aside. Her grandmother had understood something that took years to learn. That accountability wasn't the same as destruction. That consequences could be doorways instead of walls. Bryce Callahan was gone, but the company remained. And the people who worked there, the good and the bad, the complicit and the innocent, would have to find their own way forward. She couldn't control what they did with the chance. Could only ensure that they had it. 3 months later, the Federal Monitor's first quarterly report was released on a Tuesday. Evelyn read it in her new office on the 39th floor of Vanguard Meridian Tech, the same building where she had been dismissed, the same company where she now held a board seat. The report documented progress and challenges. Hiring practices had been revised, training programs implemented. But old habits died hard. The culture that had allowed discrimination was embedded deep, and changing it would take more than policy memos and mandatory workshops. 3 executives had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into the shareholder notification failures. Their names were familiar from the documents Evelyn had reviewed months earlier, the people whose credentials had been used to change trust addresses, to delete records, to make certain shareholders disappear. 2 had resigned before the investigation concluded. 1 was still fighting. The EEOC had announced a preliminary finding of reasonable cause. Settlement discussions were ongoing. No dollar figures had been disclosed, but the negotiations were said to be proceeding in good faith. And somewhere in the building, in conference rooms and cubicles, in break rooms and elevators, conversations were happening that Evelyn couldn't hear but could sense. The recalibration that occurred when power shifted. The uncertainty of people who had benefited from the old system and weren't sure what the new one would demand. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Webb. Terrence Rowe resigned today, taking a position at a firm in Atlanta. The general counsel, the man who had sat across from her in that first meeting, offering nothing and expecting compliance. She typed back, "Was he pushed or did he jump? Does it matter?" It didn't. The departure spoke for itself. Another casualty of accountability. Another vacancy to be filled by someone who might do better or might not. Evelyn left the office at 6:30, walked through the lobby where, 3 months earlier, she had been dismissed as no one. The security guard at the desk, a different one now, Torres having been transferred to another building, nodded respectfully as she passed. "Have a good evening, Ms. Scott." "You too." The title still felt strange. Ms. Scott, board member, shareholder, the woman who had changed everything by refusing to accept that she was nobody. Outside, Tampa's evening was warm and humid. The city moving through its routines, indifferent to the battles being fought in corporate towers and legal filings. She walked to her car, sat behind the wheel, did not start the engine. In the seat beside her, her grandmother's leather notebook. She carried it everywhere now, a talisman, a reminder. She opened it to a random page, an entry from 12 years ago. "Evie graduated today, top of her class. She'll go far. Farther than I ever did, but I hope she remembers where she came from, who believed in her before anyone else did, and I hope, when she has power, she uses it well. Not perfectly, no one uses power perfectly, but well. Thoughtfully, in service of something larger than herself." Evelyn closed the notebook. Had she used power well? She had brought down a CEO, reshaped a board, forced a company to reckon with its failures. But the people hurt by those failures, the 6 complainants, the unnamed others, the candidates who had walked into that lobby full of hope and walked out having been made to feel small. Their wounds didn't disappear because Bryce Callahan had resigned. Their experiences weren't erased by policy changes and federal monitors. Justice was incomplete, would always be incomplete. The best you could do was move the needle. Create conditions where future harm was less likely. Plant seeds whose fruit you might never see. Her grandmother had planted seeds 26 years ago. Had invested in something she believed in and waited to see what grew. Evelyn was still tending those seeds. Would be tending them for years to come. She started the car, pulled out of the parking garage, drove into the Tampa evening. Behind her, the Vanguard building glowed in the fading light. Different now. Changed. Still imperfect. Still struggling with the weight of what it had been and the uncertainty of what it might become. But changed. That was something. Not everything, but something. 6 months later. The settlement was announced in a press release timed for maximum weekend burial. $14 million distributed among 23 complainants. No admission of wrongdoing, but a commitment to continued oversight. The federal monitor would remain in place for 3 years. Annual audits would be conducted. Reports would be made public. Evelyn read the press release from her apartment. A new place, purchased after she decided to make Tampa permanent. Close to the company, close to the work that remained. 23 complainants. 6 had come forward originally. 17 more had emerged once the investigation made it safe to speak. $14 million. A significant sum by any measure. But divided 23 ways, it worked out to just over $600,000 each. Enough to change lives, not enough to repair them. The woman who had been the first to file, Janelle Washington, age 34, rejected for a marketing position in 2021, had given an interview to a local newspaper. "It's not about the money," she had said. "It's about being believed. For 3 years, I told anyone who would listen that something was wrong at that company. No one did anything. Now they have to. Do you feel vindicated? I feel tired, but also hopeful. Maybe the next woman who applies for a job there won't have to go through what I did. Maybe. That was the best anyone could offer. Maybe things would be different. Maybe the changes would stick. Maybe the culture would actually transform, rather than simply learning to hide its biases more effectively." Evelyn had no guarantees. Only the chance she had created. The board met quarterly now, with Evelyn present at every session. Some of the old members had departed. Dale Hensley, citing health concerns. Victoria Marsh, claiming scheduling conflicts with her institutional obligations. Raymond Cross, the newest member, remained, finding his footing in a company that had become something other than what he'd joined. New faces had arrived. A civil rights attorney with expertise in corporate governance, a technology executive who had built her own company from nothing and sold it for 9 figures, a retired federal judge who specialized in employment law. The conversations were different now, harder, more honest. Questions were asked that would never have been raised under the old regime. What are our actual demographics? Not the press release numbers, the real ones. Who's in leadership? Who's in the pipeline? Where are we losing talent and why? When was the last time we audited vendor relationships for diversity? Do we know who we're doing business with and what their practices are? If someone in this building experienced discrimination tomorrow, what would happen to them? What systems exist to protect them? And are those systems actually used? Not all the questions had good answers, but the questions were being asked, and that was something the old board had never done. 1 year later, Evelyn stood at a podium in the Vanguard Conference Center, the same room where, 12 months earlier, Bryce Callahan had announced his resignation. The room was different now, reconfigured. The intimidating layout of the old design, built to make visitors feel small, had been replaced with something more open, more welcoming. The faces in the audience were different too, more diverse, more varied. The product of hiring practices that actually sought out candidates from different backgrounds rather than filtering them out. She was speaking at the company's first annual Bellamy-Scott Leadership Conference, named for her grandmother, funded by the company's new diversity initiative, open to employees from all levels, focused on developing the next generation of leaders. "My grandmother believed in something," Evelyn said. "She invested in a vision when no one else would take it seriously. She held that investment for 26 years without demanding anything except that the company live up to its potential. For a long time, it didn't. For 8 years, this company forgot about her, decided she didn't matter, excluded her from the conversations and decisions that her investment had helped make possible. I'm standing here today because I refused to accept that exclusion, because I demanded accountability, because I believed that what had been broken could be fixed. But I'm also standing here because other people refused, because Janelle Washington filed a complaint when everyone told her it was pointless, because Marcus Webb took cases that weren't going to make him rich, because Denise Okonkwo picked up a phone and acknowledged that something had gone wrong. Change doesn't happen because one person demands it. It happens because many people, over time, refuse to accept that things have to stay the way they are. This company is different now. Not perfect, we have a long way to go, but different. The systems that allowed exclusion are being dismantled. The culture that tolerated discrimination is being transformed. The people who built their careers on making others feel small are gone or going. My grandmother would have been proud, not of me, though I hope she would have been proud of me too, but of what this company is becoming, of the potential she saw 30 years ago finally starting to be realized. That's her legacy, not the shares, not the money, the belief that things can be better, and the willingness to hold on to that belief even when the evidence suggested otherwise. Evelyn paused, looked out at the audience, the employees who would carry this work forward long after she was gone. I'm asking you to carry that belief, to hold on to it when it's hard, when progress feels slow, when the people who liked things the way they were push back against change. Because they will push back. They always do. The forces that created the old system are still here, still working, still looking for ways to reassert themselves. But you have something they don't. You have each other. You have documentation. You have the receipts. She smiled slightly, the phrase that had become a kind of internal joke. The receipts, the evidence, the proof that made denial impossible. Keep the receipts, build the case, hold the line. That's how change happens. Not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily, inexorably, until the people who said it couldn't be done have to accept that it already has been. Thank you. After the conference, Evelyn walked through the building one more time, past the lobby where she had been dismissed, past the conference room where Margot Lindquist had told her she wasn't a culture fit, past the executive suite where Bryce Callahan had once ruled. The people who passed her nodded, smiled, said hello. They knew who she was, what she had done, and what she continued to do. She took the elevator to the ground floor, walked out into the Tampa afternoon. The sun was bright, the air was warm. The city moved around her, indifferent and alive. In her bag, her grandmother's notebook, the leather worn soft from a year of constant carrying, the pages filled with 26 years of observation and hope. She opened it to the final entry, the one she had read 100 times, the words she would carry for the rest of her life. They forgot about me. They decided I didn't matter. Someone should remind them that forgetting doesn't erase, it just postpones. But remember, Evie, justice isn't just about punishment, it's about making things right. Leave room for people to grow, leave room for them to change. Some won't, but some might, and the ones who might deserve the chance. Evelyn closed the notebook, tucked it back into her bag. Her grandmother had been right, about everything. The forgetting, the postponement, the chance for change. And now, finally, things were starting to be made right. Not completely, not everywhere, not for everyone, but somewhere, for someone. Because someone had refused to be forgotten. That was enough. It would have to be enough. Because that was what justice looked like in the real world. Not perfect, not complete, but present, persistent, growing, one receipt at a time. Epilogue. 2 years later, the quarterly shareholder report arrived on a Tuesday. Evelyn read it in her office. The same view. The company she had reshaped now humming with a different energy. Revenue was up 18%. Employee retention had improved for the first time in 5 years. The diversity metrics, once a source of embarrassment, were now cited in industry publications as a model. The Federal Monitor's final report had been filed 6 months earlier. The 3-year oversight period had ended with a finding of substantial compliance. Not perfect, but substantial. Bryce Callahan was running a small technology consulting firm in Miami. His name appeared occasionally in trade publications, the fallen CEO seeking redemption through modest ventures. Whether he had found it was not Evelyn's concern. Margot Lindquist had left the industry entirely, last heard of teaching at a community college in Georgia, though the connection between her departure from Vanguard and her career change was never publicly confirmed. The 6 original complainants had all moved on, some to other companies, some to different careers. One had started her own business, funded in part by her settlement money, specializing in workplace diversity consulting. And Evelyn herself? She remained on the board, would remain as long as she felt useful, as long as there was work to do. But she had also started something new, a foundation in her grandmother's name. Funding for underrepresented founders, scholarships for students who looked like her. The kind of support that Bellamy-Scott would have appreciated. Practical, patient, invested in potential rather than proven success. The Foundation's first annual report had been published the previous month. 7 companies funded, 12 scholarships awarded, a model starting to prove itself. Her grandmother would have approved. The phone on her desk buzzed. Her assistant. "Ms. Scott, your 11 o'clock is here." "Send them in." The door opened. A young woman entered, 23 years old, recent graduate, applying for a position in product strategy. "Ms. Scott, I'm Destiny Washington. Thank you for meeting with me." Washington, the same last name as Janelle Washington, the first complainant. Evelyn noted it but didn't mention it. Could be coincidence. Could be family. Didn't matter. What mattered was the person in front of her, the qualifications, the potential, the chance to do what Vanguard had failed to do when Evelyn herself had walked through those doors. "Please sit down. Tell me about yourself." Destiny sat, took a breath, began her story. And Evelyn listened. Really listened. The way she wished someone had listened to her all those years ago, the way things were supposed to work, the way, finally, they did. The end. If this story moved you, smash that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, stories like Evelyn's are happening every day. The only question is whether anyone is paying attention. Until next time. 3 months after the quarterly report, Evelyn received a package at her office. No return address. Plain brown paper. Her name handwritten in careful block letters. Inside, a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. The paper read, "Miss Scott, there's another company. Another pattern. Another silence that needs to be broken. The files are encrypted. The password is your grandmother's birthday. Someone told me you keep the receipts. A friend." Evelyn looked at the USB drive, at the cryptic note, at the city spread beyond her window. Somewhere out there, another company was hiding something. Another system was silencing people. Another injustice was waiting to be exposed. She plugged in the drive, typed the password. The files began to open. And Evelyn Scott, granddaughter of Bellamy-Scott, keeper of receipts, prepared to do it all again.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.